Well, Mr. Chair, you do have a quorum.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and get started? We don't really have a agenda, but we do, or I guess we do have an agenda. What am I saying? Sue, why don't you go ahead and do the roll call?
Sue, I'll do that for you.
Okay.
So Stephanie Finley,
Here.
John Bridges,
Here.
Molly Olson,
Here.
Angel Aguilar,
Yep.
Don Clements. We see Don.
Yeah. Can somebody write down the phone number for him to call in and flash it on the camera? That'd be great, Cassandra.
Francisco Stoller. Fran said he stepped away for a minute. He'll be back. Lonnie Parrish. Josh Duder.
Here.
Cassandra Olvin.
Here.
And Joe Morlock said he'll be about 30 minutes late, Mr. Chair. He's caught in another meeting.
Okay, so on the agenda, one of the digits left off, but we have minutes from November 9th, 2020 and November 23rd, 2020 meetings. And so those are on the consent calendar. Is there any substantive changes to those minutes? I don't know how down in the weeds we want to always get on these. Like one of the minutes had the word actual and it was meant to be actuarial.
Which page? Which minutes and which page?
Yeah, it's so November 9th. I guess one on the first page. I'm not Kurt Walker, and anybody who confuses me with Kurt Walker's got to have their eyes checked.
Okay.
So why don't you hold that back up, Cassandra?
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
See if he sees this. How's that look?
It's pull it back just a little bit. There you go, right there. He's reading it. I think he's reading it out loud for Kat to call in. Just one more, give him about 20 more seconds.
And then I think we'll need to get the meeting ID pinned up there.
Okay. So then, Doug, that actuarial was on page 2 of that November 9th meeting.
Remember which paragraph?
Yeah, it's right below a line that says Chair Bridges asked about the big jump in 2018. It's just after that, that is by itself, and then there's a paragraph, and the second line has actual rather than actuarial.
Okay.
I mean, there's other, just editorial stuff.
Hi, can you hear us? Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to give Don my phone and he's going to continue on the meeting here.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Great.
So we're getting started, Dawn, and we were going over the consent calendar. I made a couple changes on the November 9th meeting. I would also note the November 23rd meeting, you list Kurt Walker as getting the meeting started.
Got that change?
Okay. And then the first full paragraph, I mean, it says standing point to react to, but it's really starting point. Anybody else have any changes or questions or concerns about the minutes?
I noted a couple grammatical things, but substantively, it seemed to track with what I recalled from the meetings.
Okay. Yeah, I
So-
think there were some editorial things that I just didn't want to mess with. All right, well, I would move, entertain a motion to move the consent calendar.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
all right, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye,
Aye.
okay. Any opposed? It looks like it's unanimous, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, so our new business is this prioritization of project list. So this is gonna kind of be a free form conversation, one at which I would want to go around the room and have everybody answer the questions I'm gonna ask. And the first one's probably the easiest question, and that is, did this new grouping of information help with kind of understanding and grappling with things? How about just, I'm gonna call on people. Molly, what do you think?
I did find it useful. It took a little bit of sleuthing to map it together. So by that, I mean figuring out what each subgroup's zoning was. So what's industrial versus residential, and then trying to figure out, and I have questions about which parts of the road development, wastewater and water, sewer, et cetera, must be done together because they don't make sense to break up. But I actually found it quite useful for talking about strategies for using the urban renewal dollars. So for me, it was good. Just took a little while to figure out.
Okay, and how about you, Cassandra?
I liked it a lot. It was really useful to see it organized that way, and it looked like all the projects really met with our intent. So I would welcome recommendations from staff as far as prioritizing it, because I think the value or the costs exceed the maximum indebtedness at the 6%, but I really appreciated the work it probably took to organize it in that way. So thank you.
And Don, did you find the new organization useful?
Well, I would have, John, but we've had some problems here and I haven't been able to get the information, but that's not your fault.
Okay. Is there something we can do to assist you?
No, I've just got to get it run off and my emails have been down and I haven't been able to get Doug's information. And Kat just brought me a lot of stuff, but
Yeah, it's about 67 pages, so it's a big
yeah,
chunk.
right. She brought me about that amount, but
Okay,
anyway, I'll just have to view it and trust everybody else's judgment.
okay. And Angel, how about you? Do you find the new format of information useful? And I guess in some respect, the question also goes to, is there more that we can do to make it more useful too?
I think I'll start off where Don left off, and that is, I will trust those who have put this together and really analyzing how it all comes together. It helps us really understand and see that breakup. But as far as making any meaningful contribution to say yay or nay, I don't capture, I don't grasp how it all plays together. And I'm having to defer that to those who are in that, making those types of the decisions.
Okay, well, let me continue around the room. How about you, Josh? Did you find the new format for the information useful?
Was it sent to the city email?
Yes.
Yeah.
I failed to look into my city email inbox. So,
That's why I also sent out the reminder email today that gave you the link to the packet on there. It's so large, it will not push through to your private emails, but it will to the city email accounts.
understood. Okay,
Okay,
I
Stephanie?
have to review it.
Okay. How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I like this. It helps me. I'm a visual person, and so this helps me organize it a little bit better in my mind. And I'll be honest in saying that I didn't dig into it as deep as I would like to and will, but reading through it, I think this looks way better than how I would ever be able to do it. But it certainly helps me as someone who's not an expert in this area to be able to conceptualize what we're talking about. So I like it.
Good. And before I get to Fran, I'll just mention that this is clearly one of those projects where we would super benefit from all looking at very big maps in one room, walking around and talking about it. I mean, it fits that model so much better. So we're just stuck and foreshadowing what we're going to do. I think we're going to use 2 or 3 meetings and try to do that kind of. And I've got a series of 3 or 4 questions where we'll just go around the room and try to pick people's brains on how they feel about it. I just wanted to make sure that people felt like they had a good tool in terms of organization, which I felt like it is. What did you think, Fran? He may not have stepped back over. All right. So the kind of questions, I'd like to go around the room again and just to start talking to get a sense of how people feel. I've heard at least 2 people say, hey, I'm going to lean heavy on staff on things, and I get that. That's something that people would want to do, but staff really needs our input. They can't say, hey, this is the way you ought to do it. They need to kind of hear what we think are priority infrastructure, or priority zoning, or priority areas. And then I even got to the concept of some sub areas, particularly with like sub area A. Can we do a sub area? Does that make sense that we start from the north and work down? So having said all that, ultimately we need to pick the projects at the end of whatever meeting 2 or 3. We need to pick the projects that align with the budget. And so ultimately that's where we're going to get to. And it might be that you fund 80% of something, but it's your priority. You just think that there's some resources elsewhere. Okay. So my first topic, now that we know that people are comfortable with the kind of data collection and organization, is I'm going to go around the room and ask for everybody's input on whether they value a particular infrastructure over other infrastructures. So Molly, I'm going to pick on you first again.
No problem. I want to answer the question. I hope I'm answering it the way you are thinking. I value the set of infrastructure that turns on development. So I'm leery about fixing sidewalks in areas where it's already developed as part of urban renewal. But if we're building a new road, obviously we're going to do the sidewalks at the same time. So I'm more think of it as a series of, if I do water, wastewater, sewer, road, the railroad crossing, if that's a requirement. And because of that, I can turn on the industrial zoned A, and I think part of B. I had trouble assigning the usages. Then that turns on a whole usage in an area where we don't have industrial property. So I didn't look at them like one's more important than the other, but there's some set of things we would have to do to make it developable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's fair to say, hey, there's these 3 infrastructure pieces that need to go there. I think if I read correctly, like stormwater can be dealt on a site-by-site basis. So that's maybe something, that's an infrastructure I think I'm hearing them saying, hey, we don't have to provide for that. Really, if you just did the transportation, sanitary sewer, water, you've got what you need.
Exactly. So whatever and then this is where we lean on staff. There are times where they may say, hey, stormwater, I'm not an expert in it at all, but hey, if we did it for this area, the cost would be a third of what it's going to be if everyone does their own, or something like that. So that's the kind of feedback from staff on these that would be great. I have no idea.
Okay. So Cassandra, how about you?
I share a little bit of what Molly's saying because staff has a better sense of timing and what's developable right now. But I did note that the water line improvements to create a looped water system that extends kind of into that industrial area that's getting closer to the mill, that seems like a comprehensive project that would afford you a lot of opportunity within the adjacent sites, and is not the kind of project you can piecemeal. So that made sense to me as kind of one of the starting projects to do. But again, if Doug told us, well, right now we have someone that is, ready to build if only they had this, ingress and this underground utility, and that would flip that into a developable parcel that's going to grow more increment faster than I trust the administrators of the plan to do that. What I liked about what I saw in all the areas of the projects is it's all things that I think are worthwhile investments for tax increment financing, with the exception of the trolley study, which was by comparison pretty small, but they all fit to me as far as good uses of that. So it would be what within the first year you maybe have about $7 million, or maybe not even that much. I can't remember the projections that Tibby has put in there, but so what's a project within that area that's adjacent, a now developable or soon to be developable spot that wouldn't be otherwise. So I'm sorry, I know you're wanting us to go down and prioritize, but I feel a little bit ill-equipped to rank them, not knowing what how shovel ready each site within the sub areas are.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, Cassie, I'm just trying to have a conversation so the staff can hear that conversation. And I want to make sure that everybody is heard. I mean, I talk too much, and this is a way for me to make sure that I'm listening and that everybody participates in it. Because, who knows, someone might have a super passion about something, and I don't want to miss that. So Fran, have you been on the horn long enough to know what we're kind of talking about?
Are we just prioritizing the areas that we see or that we think should get the most attention?
So,
sorry, I was late.
Yeah, when you were gone, I asked the question, is this new set of information and the way it's presented to us, is it more useful in trying to figure out these prioritizations? And pretty much everybody roundly said they thought it was. So then, okay. And so what we're gonna get to, the ultimate question is prioritizing a set of projects and aligning it with the total budget of whatever growth rate we choose. But before we get there, I wanted to just kind of ask about, hey, how do you feel about infrastructure? Is there one that you favor over another? And then I'm going to ask the same sort of thing about zoning. Are you more interested in residential zone work, industrial zone work? And then I'm also going to ask the same thing about these different sub areas. So I just want to draw everybody's comments out on each of those subject matters. So we're kind of right on that infrastructure piece. Is there a particular feeling you have about infrastructure in terms of what would be useful or successful in getting development of the URA?
I feel like I'm with Cassandra on that, where I don't know if I know enough about infrastructure in general, but I guess where I think I'm going to have more of an opinion is where I feel like we should focus the entire thing or whatever, and whatever that means regarding the infrastructure and whatnot. I think it'll be easier for me to say something logical at that point, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. So Stephanie, how about you?
So I sort of echo what Molly and Cassandra said, is that I tend to lean towards those projects that it's sort of, if you build it, they will come kinds of things. So that those water projects and things that sort of get us something new rather than improving the old to start out with. I mean, I certainly, all of the projects I really like. The other thing that I lean towards are things like the trail. You know, the riverfront trail, that's important to me in terms of sort of a balance between the things that people can't see and the things that people can see, so that you know, the public at large sort of sees the bang for their buck. And so I would prioritize that sort of towards the top of my list in conjunction with some of those things that the public at large doesn't necessarily see, but are certainly necessary in order for us to sort of build that out and draw, you know, draw business and those kinds of things to areas that I think will see some more traffic than we would see with just improvement sort of things.
Okay. And that's good to hear. That's the sort of information they need to hear. I'd just ask a follow-up question on that. And is it, and that is, there's a esplanade and then there's trails, and they both are big areas. The trail is a bigger area than the esplanade. Do you have a particular amongst them, or do it all, or do half of it, or?
I would love to say do it all, but I also know that costs a lot of money. I don't know that I necessarily am leaning a lot more to one or the other. I would love it all. I think that's where we're going to get a lot of sort of support from the community and people understanding sort of what urban renewal does for us. And so I love all of that, but I don't know that I lean more towards the trails or the esplanade as being higher priority.
Okay. And kind of a related question, and you don't have to answer this right now, is, and I can't tell you this for sure, but I think those trails and the esplanade traverse through different zones, you know, the residential, the park setting, and the industrial. Would you maybe have a strategy that is different for the different zones that it's in?
I don't think so. I would have to think more about that question to see if there's something more that I'm not thinking about, but I don't think so. You know, I think those kinds of projects are sort of really important, especially when we're building out like this, to sort of involve the community in. And I also think it's something that people that aren't going to enjoy the other parts of this project will be drawn to, and sort of that balance of making sure that we're hitting sort of different areas in terms of who's being served by these things.
Okay. So on that infrastructure issue or question, Angel, what do you feel?
You know, it's like Stephanie just mentioned about build it and they will come. My thought process in that is that what we want to start experiencing is getting some success right off the bat. And if we make a lot of capital improvements, a lot of investments, and then sit on that investment, wait for something else to happen to make that infrastructure build out or whatever work was done, to try to say, hey, we've done something, now this development is going forward. But the risk, the downside to that is, the potential is, if there's not a specific development that is already has spoken up saying, this is what we are going to do, if you do this, this is what we're going to do. If that's not in place, it may become all of a sudden a vast investment on the infrastructure, and then we just sit on it and nothing happens. And that may have a reverse effect on what we're trying to accomplish. And so I'm thinking, if we look at, as far as prioritizing, if we can look at properties that are ready to come online that are already saying, we're willing to do this if this exists or if this, whatever it is. And if we can tackle those smaller projects, might be smaller dollar amounts, but if we can start realizing success on those smaller projects, it might all of a sudden we can point to see, now that's what the urban renewal can do in the rest of these projects. And all of a sudden we have the community buying in and say, oh, this is great, and we're looking forward to these other projects coming on. That would be the only change that I would take, the only change on the approach that I would take.
Okay. And Don, do you have particular infrastructure that you would prioritize over others?
No, I wouldn't prioritize one over the other. The things that I have concerns with, which has nothing to do with priorities, is 30 years on this thing. Was it decided that this would go for 30 years, John?
So it's got potentially a shorter time frame. We as a group said that we want it, or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It could have a shorter time frame, or it could have an indefinite time frame. We as a group said that, to be fair to the partners that we're doing the tax increment with, we want a hard deadline. So even if
that's correct.
Yeah, and so that's what our group decided. Now, mind you, we're just deciding for our group, and then it goes to city council, and they're the ones that really get to decide, right? But I think most people would be on board with, hey, we're gonna choose this, and we're gonna have a hard deadline.
Not necessarily. I think that the agencies also can opt out of this if they so choose. And for 30 years, I would recommend to our board that we opt out. It's too long. Without some type of increment where the thing comes on the tax rolls. The second problem that I see with the way this is going is with the projects with water, sewer, stormwater, all of those. Whenever we've done several projects, and we've always had to pay for all that. Why all of a sudden are we changing the system and we're giving something away that may or may not help this community? I'm a little bit puzzled by it, especially with the even with the trail system and stuff. We've been working on that, and we'll continue to work on it. But tax increment financing basically throws another step in the process, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it if it would help. But the question I have is, who's going to come here because we have it and not come here because we don't have it? And I've just got a lot of questions that way. And I apologize for bringing this up, but I just got to thinking about it and looking at all that. And also, we have system development charges that has been charged. We paid them. Everybody else has paid them. And the SDCs is for future growth and can only be used for that, whereby increment financing can be used for what needs to be repaired. And but
See, I don't think
again,
so.
I'm just bringing up concerns.
Yeah, so Don, in some respect, the concerns you're discussing and or the concerns you're bringing up and the topics you are discussing are things that we already decided as a group. You know, we already had a vote and said, we want to do this. We want to recommend this to the city council. I don't, this is going to bring a tool to the city of Newburgh that doesn't currently exist. And it will bring, essentially because of the way the school dollars are replaced, it'll bring more state funding to our community. It'll allow us to have another tool to use in conjunction with SDCs. I don't think you're correct, and the consultant isn't here right now, but I don't think you're correct in saying we can rebuild stuff with this money. This has to be spent to leverage future development. And we don't know who that company is going to be, but we know this will make it more likely that the company will come to us, particularly when other communities are taking advantage of this very same tool. And we're in a competitive market with a manufacturer of goods. We're in a competitive market with an employer that is going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment. And that's what gets the increment charging. It gets going because of that. So if we don't, we're positioning ourselves so we're better able to compete with other communities of like size. And, it's not, I've had conversations with Doug, including this morning, about, we want our management of this system to be going, okay, if we can do a trail in this area, how do we apply for a grant from the state parks department? If we do a road in this area over here and it's eligible for 20% SDCs, how about us paying it now and getting repaid by the SDC when the SDC is available? Because that our plan is going to have a 30-year window. SDCs, as you know, are collected over a 20-year window. And so our plan will last longer and can front load some of those expenses, get something built so that people will and businesses will come to the community, and then we get repaid over time. The same could be true of development costs, whether it be like a local improvement district or a advanced financing arrangement. I think this is really all about trying to create another tool that gives more flexibility, that can partner with more aspects of the city and partner with and leverage resources that are outside the city. So
I agree. I agree with everything you said, John. I don't necessarily disagree. The difficulty that I have is like with this system, if it does what you said, I'm all for it. Unfortunately, I think there was an administrative cost that was put in this system for the next 30 years that will be X number of dollars. And we, TBF&R, as well as Shalem Park and Rec District, we're giving up a huge amount of money, but we don't mind doing that if it helps the community. We've always done that, and we'll continue to do it. It's just that I'm not sure that we're approaching this in the best light. 30 years is a long time, John. That's a long time.
Because it's a very,
you have to admit,
it's a long time because it's a process that doesn't set aside funding at a very rapid pace, particularly at the beginning of the plan. That's why it's long. But let me get back on point. What we're discussing here right now is whether or not you have a preference over some infrastructure versus another. Does the Park District want to have trails and an esplanade built? Do they see that as more important than water and roads?
Well, from our viewpoint, trails and those type things, we would have to say that that was more important because that's what we do. But at the same time, I think that the infrastructure for the others are also important. We're willing to share that and look at that as well. But to answer your question, no, but I think well, I lost my train of thought, but that's
Why don't we
all
give,
right.
why don't we give the
What you're
microphone
trying
to
to
Josh
do.
so he can give his 2 cents on this topic?
All right,
Okay,
do it.
all right.
Yeah, insofar as infrastructure is concerned, from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, I'd be most interested in the type of infrastructure that goes in place to help attract businesses, obviously, but also maybe the type of infrastructure that would help mixed buildings like vertical housing units, possibly attracting not only businesses but also workforce housing. So there might be some reimbursement projects or reimbursement money out there for those types of projects. So I hear what you're saying, John, and I hadn't thought about it that way as front loading the building and then seeking alternative funding to reimburse us for the effort. So those types of things like water and sewer and that. But sorry, my dogs are out in the backyard barking too. Yeah, so I'm gonna go rescue my kids and my dogs. But
Okay,
that's it.
thanks. All right, I think we've heard from everybody except for maybe Joe Morlock. Joe, we're kind of building up to the concept of what projects we think are the ones that should be funded by the URA. And we were just trying to ask everybody if they have a particular infrastructure that they think they would place a priority over that particular infrastructure versus others, or and we're going to ask similar questions about whether there's you would focus on a particular zone, and we're going to ask a similar question like whether you'd focus on a particular area, geographic area. So we're just breaking those down a little bit. What's your thought, Joe?
Are you making me just choose one, or do I get to choose?
No, you can say, and
sorry, Doug.
someone of the group has said, these 3, because that's what gets you shovel ready to build a tip up industrial building or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just one thing that I have not heard anybody say, which I'm kind of surprised, is wouldn't it be great to have high-speed internet in the downtown core?
That was actually going to be my suggestion. We've talked about this before. We're moving ahead with that on our own because we can't really wait. And I think that high-speed infrastructure, not just for your core, but also as you start thinking about trying to attract more folks to the industrial zones, they all need massive internet connectivity, and we don't have it. 15 years ago, we put it in Canby. So they've got gig to the home. It's all over town. It goes through the schools as well. The fire department, the police, everybody has high level county driven high-speed internet. So I think that that's something we have also discovered within our community, of course, because we've been trying to provide internet hotspots to families all over. We distributed 750 of them to people who do not even have internet connectivity in the area. And those are serving families of multiple kids. So that's been, for those of you who have a commercial company, you may have varying experiences with them, depending on who they are, how craptastic it might be, or how great it might be. It just depends on that. So I think high-speed internet is certainly something that would attract. I also know that they're not very sexy to do things like water and stormwater pipes and things like that, but those are huge dollar projects that you have to have a functional city. You've got to be able to have the right kind of water pressure, not just for fire suppression, but also just getting water to all those places. And you've got to have the stormwater stuff is hugely costly to be digging up the street. And I would suggest things that and I think we talked about this before about trusting the city staff to put those things together. But if you're digging up the street to put in wastewater pipes, let's lay down a bunch of fiber optic cable too, because you've already got the street open. And the most costly part of those projects is opening up the street, right? So anytime you're doing those kinds of projects, I think those are huge. And so I guess those would be some of for me, the bigger things. I think high-speed internet is huge. I do think, even though they're not very sexy, I think it's important to do very core infrastructural pieces that are just super expensive, that you need to have so you can bring people downtown. And I mean, there's lots of stuff I'd love to do, pedestrian walkways and, signage and wayfinding, but I think we can find other ways to do some of those that may not be necessary through this funding stream. I think there are some other kinds of things. If you've seen the work that they did in downtown old kind of Oregon City, nice little walkway along the side, and they've redone downtown, and so they've done a nice job. So anyway, that's
all right.
I will pause there. I don't want to take over the conversation.
Okay, Joe, so let's move on to the kind of the second part of and understand these are all things that the city staff want to hear from us all about. So we have a variety of different zones that are in the URA. Do you have an opinion as to what zone we ought to prioritize working towards first, whether it be industrial, residential, parks? What's your thought on that topic?
Well, I have lots of thoughts on them. Let me give you the first one. I know that we are struggling with industrial land or industrial facility. As for instance, if we were trying to look for leasing office space, because you can see this office behind me, built in 1910, it's coming down at some point. Mother Nature will bring it down, and it's not a very safe place to be in anymore, I think, in the future for seismic stuff. So I would be looking at certainly improving the ability for more businesses to come, because what we have heard from places who are trying to expand, they may have to leave because they can't expand. So they've got to go somewhere else. So I think there's a value in that. Are you talking about the waterfront area down there too?
Well, I'm talking about anything in the URA.
The waterfront thing, I was on that group as well. The waterfront. Yeah, the waterfront area is interesting and enticing. I do like our kind of old downtowny area and feel. I think people see that a lot because they come through town, and that there's been attracted to that as well. So I think there is some value in, you see it when you go to Redmond, you see it when you go to, like I said, Oregon City before. And so there is some definite attraction to that. I think balancing those two things.
Okay, so I'm asking a little bit different question, I think.
Okay.
So one of the goals we're trying to do is to say, what should we focus on first? And I'm just trying to ask that in different ways, right?
Sure.
Down at the riverfront, there is residential zone property, there's industrial zone property, there's a business zone property, there's a mixed business residential. Of those four types of zones, which do you think it's most important to work towards first?
So not area of town, but the actual kind of zone you're considering.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you my answer, but I don't want everybody to be flavored by my answer. It's
Sure.
Industrial in my mind, because that's going to create the most tax base. And so you go from this tax base that's like $100,000 an acre to a tax base that's like 18 million an acre. And it's like, boom, you got funding for your projects. So how do you feel about that?
Well, again, I think I mentioned that one about industrial. I think industrial is important. I don't think we have enough of that. I don't think we have anywhere else to expand. And I think if you're going to attract some new dollars into town and places, we're building homes that are relatively costly, and you need people who can have work in a place that they can afford. You want people to work and live, right? So I think you do need industrial. Absolutely. I think that's probably critical to bring in the other things. Housing areas are going to get developed because they make money to build houses and sell them off. And industrial certainly is one of the things that I know that we're lacking, constricted just by where we are. And it will attract more of that coming in. So, I would prioritize that.
Okay. How about you, Cassandra?
I agree. And the earlier you do the industrial in the plan, the sooner you'll build the increment, which you can leverage for the future projects. And I just wanted to go back with Don with his concerns about overall the foregone revenue that the overlapping taxing districts have to give up, because we have 11 cities in our district and we have a lot of different urban renewal agencies, and we share those same concerns. But the reality is this, Newburgh has not, since you first forged your first plan for urban renewal more than 20 years ago, you haven't really seen substantive improvements. And so you need some catalysts to be able to make these developments, make these improvements, attract investments by private developers, and ultimately, hopefully, that will improve the assessed valuation far beyond what it would experience otherwise, which will help all of the overlapping taxing districts. So I share those concerns, but the reality is Newburgh doesn't have a lot of options. You can't go bond for all these projects, and the projects that you've identified and the way you've organized it in this plan that staff has done is demonstrates that you're really looking to do infrastructure that will invite private investment that is not occurring otherwise. And that's really the goal of it. So we all kind of have to do our part and hope that it pays off, so that ultimately it's a more livable area with more valuation and more business and commerce, which benefits everybody. So.
Right, and Fran, you've raised your hands. Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah, I think I don't think I had enough context when I hopped on, but yeah, I just want to back the industrial part, like what you said, John. And I think that's going to be the most important thing regarding bringing jobs and businesses. And from there, I think it'll be easier to expand, especially with an infrastructure for the industrial and the multi-use. I don't know. I still have this dream and vision of the south end of town being this whole awesome multi-use, a lot of people type of thing. But I'm totally game on the industrial part.
Okay. And Doug, I see most people shaking their heads yes on the industrial idea. So I don't feel like, unless someone wants to raise their hand, I don't feel like I need to roundtable that. It seems like that's pretty much unanimous. Josh, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I don't know if this is part of this conversation, but I just had a question. Do we have a recruitment plan for businesses? Or is that a different conversation for another day? But
that's a different conversation. But yes, Josh, we are currently working on putting together all of the data points that we need to be able to share with site selectors and businesses about the values and benefits of being located in Newburgh.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
So we've got it narrowed down that we want to focus on industrial activity. I'd like to turn the discussion to, we had these nice sub areas given to us. I want to get everybody's reaction to whether they liked one particular sub area over another. I mean, obviously the industrial land is mostly in sub area A. So if you prioritize industrial land, then you're going to focus some of your priority there. But I'd like people to comment on whether or not they have a particular desire to see one of those other sub areas or multiple sub areas go first. I'll start with Lonnie. You need to unmute.
There we go. Sorry.
That's all right.
My first meeting of the day. I'm not warmed up to my Zoom. I've been off for the weekend, so and I apologize for being late. I had such a hard time understanding it, and I didn't fill out the form of what I wanted first. I felt part of it because my focus would be a lot on downtown Newburgh, and I didn't really see that in the descriptions. It was mostly, for me, I felt it was like sewer lines and these things on such and such. I had such a hard time understanding that. So I guess I can't really
So Lonnie, did you
tell
get
you what my part would be, that.
Lonnie, did you get the link from just last Friday or Thursday?
No, I haven't checked that out. So
Okay.
I will.
So they reorganized everything.
Okay.
And they identified sub area A through sub area H. And they're different geographic areas. So all those projects are globbed into those different geographic areas. It's way more useful. So when you look at that, That's what we're.
Yeah, I'll go get my computer and I'll be quiet and I'll look at that and listen to you guys. And if I feel educated enough, I'll weigh in then. So I apologize.
That's all right. How about you, Molly? Do you have a particular geographic area that you think we should focus on first?
There. Industrial has to come first because it will fund other things. That to me just makes a lot of sense. But I think Stephanie said something earlier that I'd like to echo, which is selecting a few small things that are highly visible, whether it's trails, don't wince, Doug, parking lot downtown, or these are choice things that will buy you a lot of goodwill with the public. And that's part of buying patience. Because even after we've spent 2 years putting in roads and all this and getting the old mill off, people are going to start saying, what are we getting for all this? You know, so yes, industrial first, anything that brings employment first. So industrial, then business, right? Because I think that will help. But as we go along, you probably need to consider doing some things that help the current environment that are, so H, Lonnie, is where the downtown stuff is sub area H. And you don't have to spend a lot, actually, just make it visible value and it buys you goodwill. So that's the only other strategy I would offer.
So I'm going to make you be more specific than that.
Oh.
I'm going to let you get off with that because I need you to identify what that thing is.
Oh, well, so as working NDC, what I do is take that list of projects and I talk with the downtown business people. And again, Doug, plug your ears because you know this. Parking is the first thing that comes up in every conversation. And fixing parking with an additional lot so that merchants don't feel like they're fighting with city employees for space is a not too expensive thing. I'm not talking about a garage, but a lot. And it would allow you to get goodwill from downtown. I can't speak for other areas as well as I can for downtown, but there are specific hot pots. I'm sure Josh can talk to some things, or Joe might be able to talk to some things that show up in his area. We ought to put those on a list. They won't immediately generate more revenue. It's this balance point that Stephanie mentioned, like you build a trail in partnership with CPRD, and then CPRD people say, hey, we're getting some value for the fact that we're foregoing our tax increment. So that it's that balance strategy, but honestly, 95% needs to go towards industrial first.
Okay, but just keep in mind, everybody, Doug and staff, and Brett's listening, I think, they really want us to give them specific feedback.
I did very specifically go through every line item on that first spreadsheet. And so they've got feedback on the downtown request.
Okay.
Yep.
So beyond just general information, Angel, is there any particular geographic area that you think it's important to focus on early in the plan?
Just going back to the point that was made earlier about focusing on the industrial, that I think is subsection H.
Okay, well, H is the downtown, I think.
No, not H.
A?
A. Mm-hmm. Going back the other way.
Okay. So,
but again, I go back to the point that I made earlier, and that is, as we start looking at making those improvements there, that there is something actually that we foresee happening in the short term with that area, not just that we're going to make the infrastructure and then just wait and hope, but rather something's actually going to be taking place there in the short term.
Sure.
And I know that there's been some discussion of things that are happening with that property now. Is there not, Doug?
Angel, yeah. So I think maybe just, Mr. Chair, if I can set a little bit of context. So I've heard some conversation about, build it and they will come, the Field of Dreams approach. Right. The other end of the continuum is you have a list of projects, and as an interested party comes in and we're having those negotiations with them, is that we're able to just in time build that infrastructure in conjunction with them building their new industrial building. So you're not spending a bunch of money up front and it sits and wait. And so that's the continuum I have to float within.
Okay.
And so hopefully that help you understand that as a group as well.
That puts my mind at ease as well.
Yeah, and you know, we're not going to necessarily say we're doing this here and therefore development will occur there. I think we just need to have some sort of discussion about what each person thinks is, so after industrial. So let's say industrial activity is our priority. What would be your next geographic priority? I think I've heard trails, so that's great. Can anybody else address other geographic areas or particular projects that they would have high on the list after industrial?
I think your transportation connectivity in areas A, B, and C will help connect some of those industrial and business zoned areas that will, to your point earlier, John, invite the much higher increment investments, and that you can then parlay into additional projects that you want to see that are feel good in the community. But I think that those feel good trails, et cetera, should be prioritized for as the plan is a little more mature, because they're not going to invite those industrial or small businesses. That's not going to be their incentive to go there. It's a wonderful livability thing. It's nice that you've woven them into their plan, but those trails within, you know, A or B or C, I think there might be some within each, should happen, but not in the beginning. I think the transportation and water infrastructure, connecting those big lots together so that you can attract those investments would be good to prioritize in the beginning of the plan.
Okay, and I'm going to pose an opposite question. I haven't heard anybody suggest that infrastructure or support of residential development is of great importance. Does someone want to champion residential activity and infrastructure for residences?
John, you're not gonna,
sorry, who was that?
John, you're not going to be able to stop the residential development. It's coming. It's already on its way.
Right.
I think
I'm not
agree with
suggesting
it.
stopping it. I'm just suggesting that if I was creating the plan, maybe the lowest priority would be anything that is to speed up residential development. It's not like I'm against it. I'm fine with it. In fact, if mixed use area, then great, do some stuff that would allow encouraging that mixed use, which is residential and business. But I just think that if I was ordering things, I would put the projects that really just benefit residential development, I would put that in the lowest rung of the plan. And I'm just trying to get reaction to that.
I would agree with you, John. Industrial, of course, would be number one. Commercial would be number two. And residential or mixed would be 3, and residential would be 4, as far as I'm concerned. An example, currently, when the mill closed, it was not part of the city. The city did not receive any funding for that. We did. Since it's closed, our evaluation has gone down. So the sooner that is replaced, then it's better for us. And I'm all for that. I believe that this might be a way to do that. I've just got some concerns with a couple of other areas. But I would agree with you, industrial and then commercial.
Does anybody feel different about that ordering?
The only thing Angel made a point earlier about, and I think you said this too, John, for the vertical housing or the mixed use housing, if something really maximizes a lot and it both attracts the small businesses, but also some vertical housing, which makes other businesses want to locate there because you're going to have people, you'll have customers.
Walkable.
Those would be, to your point earlier, residential still on the lower priority, but in the ranking of residential, I would want something where you get multi-level, multi-story residential versus single family, which isn't really going to build your increment very fast. And it's not going to invite private investment by developers, but like business and commercial.
Right.
One of the things that Newburgh needs is the more affordable housing, which can be done in the vertical ways or above businesses too. Just some apartments and things like that. It's in one of the needs of the community. Been trying to find that. So I don't know if that would fit in there, but that would be a higher priority to me than fixing sidewalks on River Street just for livability. And I'm going to, again, push for that downtown improvement. I think businesses and more people will want to move here if there's more walkability. We have to cross between two highways to get from the cultural center downtown to First Street. If there's any ways that we could help try to make that more walkable and don't feel like you're threatened on the sidewalk when you're there, and that'll bring more business. I'll be, wow, Newburgh's a really awesome town. You hear that, I'm sure, Francisco, when selling houses, people want to come to this community because it's like what they remember, the small town feel and ethics, and so I think the more we fix that up, and that's been on the agenda, we've talked about it for years and years and years, and nothing, now it's happening, and it's a lot of volunteer basis. So it'd be nice to have some funding to help those projects move forward faster. And parking is an issue, and it will be as Newburgh grows. So.
All right, and Josh, did you want to say something?
Josh first.
Yeah, I had a question about where do hotels and lodging, where does that fall into those four areas? I think it would be nice to fill in that TLT bucket once people start visiting our area again. If we had a few more higher end establishments for lodging and visitors.
It's a great idea.
Joe?
Well, I had two. One's a question, but I'll come back to the question in a second. I do also, one of the things that we've sort of skipped over to is depending upon which group of folks you're trying to attract, vertical housing development attracts a different kind of age bracket that may not be looking for, either a home, they want to live in an apartment, or be in kind of in a close-in area, which then of course drives your business development downtown because they want to go somewhere quickly to eat, they want to go somewhere quickly to have a drink, they want to buy something in close. And so certainly vertical housing is something that I don't think should get lost in this. I know we're all talking about industrial, I've already said that piece, and I don't think it all has to be totally that way. So I think it would be important for that not to get lost, because I think that is an important way to kind of grow your downtown and give it a far more pedestrian feel. When you see pedestrians, it makes it feel more pedestrian. That is not pedestrian boring, but pedestrian attractive, that people will be walking around. The second part is more of a question, or maybe just a comment about sub-area F. It's a very restricted thing, but I also know that Center Street is a major thoroughfare, and I don't remember off the top of my head, because it's a detail I've lost, about what kind of things are going into sub-area F. But if that's a road improvement along with better walkability and what have you, that is a fairly significant connection point between that southern part of town and all the way up. And so it's certainly, and it may not be a massive project, but it could be very important, feeding all those homes along the way. So back to the residential question, I sort of like sub-area F just because it's connectivity from the south to the north part of the south end of town.
Yeah, and I think that if we were to listen to Doug, he'd say that that's a critical piece for the transportation system, because you can't do all those new jobs in the industrial area without having capacity to meet the transportation planning rule. So really, I think that sub-area F is a critical feature, along with at least two other road corridor areas that are necessary. And it's kind of like those railroad crossings necessary.
Yeah, you need better visibility on there at all of those corners too. I mean, it's pretty sketchy at some of those. So it's, yeah. All right, sub area F. There we go.
Molly?
I had a question about sub-area F. It's labeled Center Street, but the actual work is called River. So is it Center or is it River?
It's River Street.
That's what I thought. So
I just messed up when I drew the map, Molly.
yeah, it's cool. I looked at it and I thought, I'll bet he means River because that's one of your main transportation corridors. Yeah. Thank you.
My old cartography days from college went by the wayside.
You're doing 3 things at once. I know that.
That's because you were doing it by hand with a ruler last time. So now you got all this computerized stuff. It's a little too high tech.
Joe, do you remember the Zipatone days? I mean, I do chide my colleagues about, I made maps with Zipatone.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like we've had enough discussion, but I reflect back to you, Doug, and invite Brett to comment on this as well. Have we provided enough feedback so that you could take kind of what we said and said, okay, we think as city staff, these are the priorities. And if we translate what you've said into priorities, here's what projects that would actually relate to.
Here's where I'm at with a takeaway. I'm going to start downtown first. I'm hearing walkability. I heard just replacing sidewalks on all these other side streets is not a high priority. I've heard infrastructure in the downtown for that vertical mixed use and that vertical component. So that ground floor commercial and housing above. So the infrastructure to do that, and then the corollary is being able to go vertical with development. I've heard transportation corridors coming from downtown to the riverfront area is important. So that would mean Blaine and River, not Center, but River. I'll fix the map. In the riverfront area, what I've heard is industrial's the top priority, and that would then come with the corresponding infrastructure to support that. The mixed commercial in the riverfront area, so that would be along 14th and Riverfront Street. So again, so we've got ground floor commercial and residential above. Kind of a corollary to that then would be the infrastructure. And so just my knowledge is we've got, playing off of Cassandra's comment, is about looping that water system. And from a staff perspective, we think that's really important. That provides us the fire flow and the capacity. We have one water line now that runs through the mill site. And then, of course, everybody commented about wastewater. And 2-3 things you have to have industry work: transportation, water, and wastewater. We call it pipes in and the pipes out. And then you got to be able to get there. The stormwater piece, I heard the comments that could be dealt with more on a localized basis. And that's kind of indicative of the way development is occurring. I think we just have a unique opportunity at the mill site with that one large pond. The North Pond is, might that be a water quality facility to help treat a big part of the riverfront area? So that's kind of, John, quickly kind of encapsulating at least what I'm hearing. That starts to frame it. That takes a lot of projects that are on that long list and kind of moves them below the 50%, let's say. And then I've heard tonight things that I would put above the 50%. And I think from that, Brett and I could go back and come back with a modified proposal that kind of shows, well, now here's the projects in sub areas A through H that responded to your conversation this evening. What do you think about that?
I think that sounds good. It'll also tell us right away whether we've blown all of our budget, right? Fran, is your hand still raised for a reason, or is it okay? What do you have?
one thing that I haven't heard mentioned that I was had written about in the last whatever round with the spreadsheet was I think it's and I don't know if there's money or whatever in there for it, but I think it's kind of silly that we still have gravel roads close to downtown. And I just think for those residences, if there's a way to kind of make it so they had asphalt roads, like, you know, like at 5th and Main, if you go down, I forgot what street that is down there, but it was encompassed within the area that we had talked about. And I don't know exactly what sub areas it is specifically, but just potentially if there was the possibility to, you know, upgrade some of the gravel roads that are close to downtown Newburgh with asphalt.
So Fran, on that
I
one,
wanted to throw that opinion out there. Yeah.
Fran, I would throw out on that one is that 5th Street to the west of Main was not in the boundary that the committee identified.
Okay.
And I forgot one thing.
Up north up towards like Morton or something up there was an area initially, but if it's no longer there, then it looks like we'll have, you know, horse-drawn carriages and gravel roads along those streets.
Yeah, all those gravel roads ended up outside of the boundary, and I did.
Okay, well then never mind.
Inadvertently omit. We talked about trails, and so I got to make sure that I bring that in. And so one of the things I was hearing was conversations about the Esplanade, and not as a top priority, but something that could occur later. So, and I've got all my notes when everybody was talking, so I can recategorize stuff.
Okay.
And I would want on trails or Esplanade, I was, you know, being intentional with Stephanie. I'm kind of curious if I've not looked at it and said, this segment and this segment make the most sense first. This other thing doesn't make any sense until you've built some of that mixed use area down by the riverfront. So I don't know if that's something you're comfortable kind of looking at, Doug, but
we looked at that.
Don should be given 2 cents on that sort of stuff.
We looked at that when we did the riverfront plan and the community visioning. And the feedback we got from that was really the Esplanade starting at the cul-de-sac on Waterfront Street and coming up to River Street would be kind of be the first. That would kind of be the residential and the mixed commercial residential area. And then from River Street to the Waterline Bridge would be a later project.
So like phasing.
Yeah, you can't, it's with these things, you know, trying to do them all at once is a big financial chunk. There's a whole financing system behind all of this. And so usually we have to do things in segments and in pieces.
Sure. Okay. So do you feel like you have enough feedback from us?
Well, I wanted to ask Brett, how do you feel about the information we were given tonight? Because I'm going to throw a lot of this back at him to say, okay, we need to fix this and this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree with you, Doug. I think we got given a nice range of things to be working in and the topics of things. One thing I want to revisit is on the stormwater. The stormwater that happens site by site, that is something that's going to happen. What we find is streets that are lacking stormwater, it's the conveyance of storm drain lines to get it moved from one area to another, not the treatment so much. And that's what these costs are mostly related to, that piece of it. Doug mentioned the item of potentially could those big ponds as the mill site be some kind of treatment element piece there. That would be that's actually a big undertaking and a big project that's not costed out in this one. That was looked at in the riverfront master plan. That's just a big no, it's a nice idea. There's just a lot of pieces to go that direction. So that would just need to be more thought given to that than what's been done to date with the issues associated with that. So it'd be something to work with the property owner, I think, as part of that part of it. So
I'm saying that's outside the scope of what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely can be part of things can feed that direction once we know more things are going, but it's I'm view the stormwater component specifically is that conveyance of getting the water moved around, not the treatments so much as how we've been looking at it. Just wanted to convey that.
Okay. And I think I would add, Mr. Chair, is one thing is when we talk about the transportation that was been discussed is it does then directly relate to traffic signals and railroad crossings. So we look at that as part of that transportation system.
Yeah, you've made that clear.
Hey, John,
Yes.
when you're talking about doing the trails and stuff, have you guys sat down with CPRD and looked at aligning plans where they already have plans in certain areas?
Yeah, we did that when we put together the master plan. And so we leveraged off of the Heritage Trail system and the bypass trail. And so in the information you have, you can recognize that we have a section of the bypass trail from Winooski to River Street and from College to the end of Weatherly Way. And then the missing piece in there is how do you get from River to College Street? And Don and Kat and I have talked through that with their consultant on how that can occur. And then from there, then there was the Esplanade piece, and then there's the connections that take you to parks, to Ewing Young, to Levitt Park, that could take you to the Hess Creek Trail in the future. CPRD is working on a grant for a piece of the bypass trail from Industrial Parkway to Winooski and then down to River. And so, yes, we have talked about those things.
Yeah, just so we.
Don, would you agree? I don't want to speak for you.
No, you're right. Our biggest issue is building a bridge across the drainway, which will be about a $2 million bridge. And we put a grant in for that, and we'll be working on that for the next couple of years. So the next big project will be Chehalem Creek. How do we cross Chehalem Creek? And we'll be working with ODOT, the city, the county, the bypass committee, the whole group. Plus, we have our congressional delegation on board as well.
Awesome. And then one other thing, John, just Doug, you went through your priorities and not once did you say parking. So just for the record in the minutes. Thank you.
All right. I think we're at the point of our agenda where we would invite public comment. I assume, Sue, that there's nothing in that regard. Okay, thank you. Go Ducks, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay, so are there any other items from staff, Doug or Brett?
Just one thing I wanted to let the committee know, that we have engaged a consultant who is starting to work on the legal description based upon the boundary you identified in the feasibility study. And we've given them a deadline towards the end of March, first part of April, to knit that all together. So that's a meets and boundaries description. So we're going back and forth and clarifying things for them on that piece. Elaine Howard is not with us tonight. She won't be with us next meeting, I don't believe. It's just with our contract and the funds we have. So Brett and I are trying to work through with the committee about the prioritization of the projects. And I will kind of watch where we're at so that when you get down to hopefully a shorter list at your next meeting, maybe it's the meeting after that, we bring back Elaine so we can talk about the growth rate and the project values and so forth as we talked with her back in November.
And maybe you guys could give us some feedback, and maybe more Brett than you. We can set our next meeting. What is it? What should we be looking at, like a time frame?
Yeah.
Jokingly, I'd say 2022, but that's not realistic. I need to keep moving forward. Pulling up a schedule here. Make sure I don't have any conflicting. So we are at the 25th. Brett, what do you think about February 22nd, which is a Monday? It's an off council night.
That should probably work.
And
yeah, I like the 2022, but that's not realistic. So
The other piece of that is that 67 pages was a little bit hard to digest in the time frame that we had. Do you think we'll have half as much information?
Yes.
And then maybe 6 days beforehand?
Yes, the packet will be significantly shorter as we winnow this list down. Brett's matrix or his Excel spreadsheet will be much shorter. So that I kind of see the next packet is your agenda, your minutes, maps, and I will fix the one on Center and River Street. And then a revised Excel spreadsheet. So we will not be sending back out to you the report out of the master plan on infrastructure. You already have that material, have it as background. So there's a lot of that background pieces that we will not send back out to you next time.
Great, great. All right, so.
So what was the date? Was there a date we were discussing? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, February 22nd, it's a Monday.
February 22nd, okay.
February.
Does that work for everybody? I see shaking yes heads, bobble heads. All right, so any items from committee members? No.
The only thing I would ask is, Doug, can we, currently it's a 30-year period. Can we put in areas that we can look at after 10 years or 15 years or 20 years and put back on the tax roll? Is that possible?
So I meant to mention something earlier, Don, and that is that, you create the plan, and then within the plan, you plan on re-looking at the plan every 5 years. So you're going to have 6 looks at everything, right?
All right.
So if you set up the plan in 2007 and then 2008 happened and, activity dropped through the floor, in 2013, you'd be going, oh my gosh, we got to completely change this plan, or we got to adjust something. So there's going to be a look every 5 years, but there's also looks every year. That's part of why there's administration costs, because somebody is watching the plan, looking for opportunities. As somebody said, I can't remember who, hey, there's this great opportunity for this mixed use over here, but we'd have to build those pipes in and out now rather than our plan in 6 years from now. And so that's really what Doug and this administrator of the plan will be doing constantly whenever an opportunity comes forward. So that's and I'm not sure how the city council is going to do it this time around. This body continued to work even after the plan was set up, and we were a recommending body. And so part of our role was going to be, hey, we're a public oversight. So you got an administrator in the city hall, you've got Doug, and you've got us trying to make sure that things are going the way they were planned to go and that they're re-looked at as appropriate.
So, Mr. Chair, on that regards, one of the suggestions that I've shared with the council when they created the Urban Renewal Agency is actually establishing a standing Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. And so that takes it out of, it's not just a staff function, staff's administering, but there would be a body that we would constantly look at projects, they make recommendations. There may be points where we get into development agreements and we want to have the public input on that before it gets to the commission, before they'd make any decisions. So it's that transparency component.
Good. I'm glad they're going to consider that. All right. Anything else by anybody? Not seeing any raised hands.
Actually, John, just a comment. A really good job leading us through a lot of information. So well done. Nice.
Good job. So Fran, Did Veda talk about crossing the street?
No, Riley told me
Oh,
because she
Riley.
called Riley right away. But I appreciate it, and it addresses what Lonnie was talking about. And thank you for looking out. It takes a village. My
Yeah,
kid tried to get hit by a car, but John basically saved her life by telling her not to, just to be more careful.
God, that's terrifying.
yeah, she
I know. So
crossed
scary.
right as the crosswalk changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
the car started to pull out and then saw her and like had
Really?
to slam on the brake. I just made sure that she
Yeah.
felt scared.
Good. And I think it sounds based on her conversation with Riley, she was very scared. So thank you.
All right, everybody, have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank
Yep.
you all.
Bye.